All right, so we got us currently at 3 minutes past the hour. I think it's a good time to go ahead and get started. First and foremost, welcome to our Mastering ServiceNow kind of web series that we have going on here. We have a jam packed full of kind of information and topics that we're going to go over today. So definitely want to go ahead and dive into it. Just as a round of introductions, my name is Japel Lyles. I'm a solution consultant specialist in the service operations space. And today I'm joined by Chris Del Castillo, who's also an SC in service operations, as well as our featured special guest, our elite partner with RapDev. And definitely stick around till the end because they're going to take over, get more into industry specific topics and leading practices that they see and have experience with, right? And also go over some of their offerings that they have when it comes to implementing service maps. So definitely stick around because they have a number of different applications within our ServiceNow store. Specifically, we'll be talking about, I think, Matt Morris is going to be the individual with RapDev. He'll be going over CSDM as a code, being able to update and manage the CMDB from Git repos and building service maps from that way. So definitely some good stuff at the end of the conversation here. So stay tuned for that. Another note for today's call, all of today's lines have been muted to prevent any background noise, right? If you have any questions during the call today, feel free to utilize that Zoom Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen there. We have ServiceNow team members standing by to answer any questions that you may have throughout the entirety of the presentation. So we'll try to answer as best of our ability for everything that that comes up during the presentation and demonstration today. All right. All right, so just the kind of overview of what these workshops, what these webinars are, right? So we're doing these web sessions around different topics. A few weeks ago, we did a topic around the CMDB and discovery, right? And we really wanted to focus on that and how it feeds into our area of conversation, obviously, today being service mapping, and ultimately how that is going to feed into our last and third session with AI Ops. So this is going to be a nice plug for that session here at the beginning, right? So mastering ServiceNow, unlocking, peak availability, reducing noise with AI Ops. This is going to be presented by our ServiceNow team digitally Thursday, June 20th, 1 p.m. same time, Eastern time. So definitely, if you can, join us for that third installment as we kind of end out this kind of web series that we have provided for you today. All right. And also a separate workshop series that we have going on. This is separate from kind of the SEs. This is being led, at least specifically for the ITOM side, by our product management teams. So you're getting information straight from the source with these workshops. These are awesome workshops because they're going to be in-person, one-day workshops, hands-on labs that you're going to be able to get access to, right? You can use that link at the bottom to access various different workshops that we have all over the globe at specific locations. So we have risk, ITOM specific, and ITSM, especially our Gen AI specific workshops. Those are all located at that link there where you can register. Because today's area of topic is ITOM, of course, I want to plug in those ITOM specific workshops our product management team are leading, right? So ITOM visibility, cloud acceleration, and one that's not shown here is going to be AI Ops as well. If you kind of use these QR codes and these links, that's just going to take you to our ServiceNow community page where our product management team has provided you with details around each one of these workshops, the agendas, as well as if you scroll down to the bottom, you have a list of all the locations available. And you can click on those links to register for those workshops. More specifically, I really wanted to emphasize this ITOM AIOps workshop. We have one coming up in Boston, because this one is going to be, and correct me if I'm wrong, Matt, this is going to be hosted by RapDev at their Boston office on June 26th, all day, 9 a.m. through 5 p.m. Eastern. So definitely going to be a very informative workshop to have with the RapDev team in ServiceNow.
Yeah, we're looking forward to it.
Again, that's going to be June 26th, so coming up pretty soon here. All right. So now that we talked about some of those webinar series and workshop series that we have, let's talk about what we're be covering today for service mapping, right? So as you can see here, some of the capabilities and tools that we're going to showcase today, you may be familiar with, right? But if not, that's okay, because as we're going through the presentation, as we're going through the demo, we're going to provide you with kind of a step-by-step guidance along the way. And hopefully we're going to spend the bulk of that in our instances, so you can see what that looks like in real time, these capabilities. So first and foremost, we'll go over, the value of service mapping, being service aware, gaining visibility within your systems and services. Point two, we're going to go over 3 of our approaches to implement service maps. I'll talk through, when and why to use those, as well as demonstrate those again in our instances. And lastly, as we're going through these approaches, we're also going to make sure that we highlight the best practices and skills needed to implement each one of them. Now, going into the actual detailed agenda, again, number one, we'll focus on how we provide value to organizations who utilize service mapping. The 3 service mapping approaches, namely our top-down, tag-based, and machine learning approaches. Then we'll go over, training paths. So resources for training paths to dive into the foundational information, the fundamentals for how we can actually get started with implementing service maps. Then we'll get into our live instance for our 3 configuration demos, end off with some takeaways that, we went over today, as well as provide you with some additional resources. So if it hasn't been answered already, we are currently recording the session. We'll provide that recording to you after this call, as well as the access to the slide deck. So if anything, if you get anything out of this call, at least you have resources that you can utilize and look to when you're starting to implement some of your service mapping at your organization today, right? So we'll provide you some links, documentation, videos of resources in the slide deck. And last but not least, again, we have our featured partner, RapDev, going to showcase their offerings and dive into their instance around specifically Service Mapping Plus, so we can get a deeper dive into that. And again, this is going to be a great time to wait until the end of the call, because there's a lot of good stuff coming out of RapDev. I myself haven't seen a partner in our ecosystem with a higher CSAT score than them. I think they have like a 4.78. So definitely good things coming out of the RapDev team. All right, so let's get into the bulk of our content here. So service mapping, what does it do? What service mapping is, kind of at a high level, is they are going to show you which configuration items, so which CIs support particular business services, how these CIs are related. These service maps are going to be held directly within your CMDB, connecting your business services to your infrastructure components, right? So as we're looking at this list here on the slide deck, it's kind of separating different organizations or departments within your own company, right? And how service mapping provides value to them. So if we look at IT service management, how does service mapping provide value to our service desk teams? So when you have that end-to-end visibility to your services, you have much more insight to the, for example, impact of incidents, the impact of changes that could occur, which ultimately can help your service desk teams make educated decisions based off of that, hopefully healthy and up-to-date data from the CMDB, right? Number two, ITOM AI ops. So when it comes to monitoring, this is going to help your NOC agents or your operations agents to properly prioritize and at times even act proactively, because now they're going to be able to see this trickle down effect of an outage and how that's going to affect different areas of their services, right? Because if you think of an example of when an outage occurs, right? When a service goes down, maybe you think of an email service. The end user, that customer doesn't put in a ticket saying, hey, my Windows server is down. Hey, my Oracle database is full. They simply say my email is down. And without service mapping, this can kind of pose a bit of an issue for those teams who have to fix the problem without that insight, without that visibility. And last but not least, vulnerability response. So when it comes to like the security operations, when it comes to security, prioritizing those vulnerabilities and how to approach that, service mapping is going to help you understand, for example, which apps are customer facing, what makes them up, what comprises those applications that may be critical in our business, and helps you act accordingly based off of that information. But the biggest takeaway here is that you have better decision making coming from this increased visibility. All right, so service mapping also creates a service-oriented or service-aware CMDB. So what we're trying to do, we're trying to take maybe previously siloed components, previously siloed data that's so critical for these different teams within our organization. And we want to make them service focused or service aware, right? So the whole idea here is taking this data that you see on the right, pulling that into that service aware CMDB, hopefully in an automated fashion with discovery, but also we give you the option to use any of our third-party tools, service graph connectors that you might have in place. And ideally, you'd want to use those in conjunction with each other to fill any data integrity gaps. But we're going to mention the CMDB often today, and that's why we kind of set these web series up the way we did, right? Starting with CMDB and discovery, because really the configuration management database, the CMDB, is going to be foundational to where we have this data stored, where that data comes from when we're building out our service maps and ultimately using it for event management and AI ops. So if we build this out here, you can see our data is coming in from the right. We can utilize that within the platform for certain records within ServiceNow, for example, change. And what that's going to look like, right? So we have this business service, and we can start to utilize our service map to give us visibility into IPC, or our incident problem change processes. So from specifically a ITSM perspective, so going back to the service desk side, service maps are going to give those service desk teams visibility that they need to accelerate their processes, whether it's incident, problem, or change, right? Just kind of looking through the bullets here, we're able to identify, for example, any incident task or tickets that are affecting certain CIs within a critical business service in our organization. Now, in this particular view, we also have event management helping us out here, because as these alerts and events are getting pulled to ServiceNow, we're automatically creating these tickets to associate those with those events and alerts. We not only are we able to see visibility into the tickets that affect certain items and services in our platform, we're also able to see which CIs have approved change requests, which are planned to happen in the future, or if we have any unauthorized change that happened in the past, we get visibility into that as well. So if we change our view here, as you can see in this particular service, we have a couple changes that occurred, and we get visibility into exactly what changes happened on which specific CIs within our service map here, right? All within the single pane of glass. So we're pulling in this data from these various different sources, yet we're not swivel chairing between different systems. It's all within ServiceNow. And that's solely because our platform is built on this one architecture, right? So we're able to, I mentioned a lot of different teams just in this example. So service desk teams, operations teams. Previously, we were talking about service desk teams or security operations teams, right? Because it's one architecture, these teams have the visibility into, change records, incident records, uh, security incident records. So all these records that they originally didn't have access to, they have access to that just because we are allowing that for that visibility, and really cutting down and streamlining the ability to work on outages and tickets at the end of the day here. Another use case that we hear from a lot of customers, being able to is being able to see the impact analysis from services being down, right? So being able to see what it means for your other applications when an outage occurs, to the other services that might be impacted by, for example, a single Windows server that may be having issues. This is going to start to make you really think more proactively as opposed to reactive when it comes to those critical business services being affected, right? And this example that we have here on the slide here we're showing an example of our unified map, where we're combining now both our dependency view and service mapping to see this graphical representation of, in this case, we're looking at a CRM application. And this is awesome because now we're able to see related business services, related infrastructure or underlying related infrastructure components and how that's going to be affected, because this is going to be similar to our old dependency view where we can see related items right on the right. We can see tickets and changes that are affecting our underlying components. Again, there's a change item here. We're also using the power of the dependency views now with service mapping, now that we combined it, to bring about these filters, right? So now we can filter by business applications. We're filtering by these CSDM methodologies, so we can see just exactly what business services are being affected, not only from an infrastructure level, but from that higher level view. So more visibility for the long run as we're making these kind of changes to our service maps, to our dependency views within this unified map here. And just to note, to this unified map, you have to be on Vancouver, a minimum of CMDB Workspace plugin version 4 in order to see the related link within your CMDB workspace. Because I know a lot of people have questions like, hey, well, how do I even access this? That's how you access it. You have to have those minimum specifications there. All right, so that is going to bring us to our first poll here. So as we get this launched, I'll just read through here. So service mapping journey status, where is your organization in your service mapping journey? So number one, we have everything mapped the way we want it. Two, we have the most important stuff mapped. We're just getting started, or mapping, I barely have a functional CMDB. So we have that launched. Go ahead and take the time to answer those questions. We have only half of the answers so far, but right now it's leaning heavily towards just getting started, and I barely have a functional CMDB, which hopefully this information that we're getting, because after seeing this, is going to be beneficial for you, right? So giving you the best practices and how to set the service mapping up, right? And knowing the importance of setting up our CMDB. So we have a couple more participants left. So I'll give it a couple more seconds here. So let's go ahead and end the poll. Share the results here. Yeah, so looks like 55% of you all are just getting started. So hopefully you get a lot of good beneficial information from our series today. And ultimately, if you want to join our last installment of the series and to see how you can benefit from AOps as well as some of our external product management workshops that are in person. Those can be more than beneficial to help you get started with your service mapping journey. Right. All right, so let's get into the approaches of service mapping and what they are and the methodologies for each one of those. So service mapping approaches. If you look at the slide here, you can see that there's four. If you have a good memory from what I said before, I said that there's three service mapping approaches, right? I swear I can count. What 1 and 2 is going to be used typically for is our top-down service mapping, right? So 1 and 2, traffic-based and pattern-based, are going to be used in conjunction for our top-down service mapping. So we have top-down service mapping comprised of 1 and 2. Our tag-based service mapping, which we'll learn here shortly, is mostly for our cloud and containerized resources. And lastly, our machine learning approach. So drilling into kind of how we choose the best approaches for our customers, right? If we start on top-down approach, because we have it's made up of two different methods here. We have a mixture of pattern and traffic-based again. This is typically going to be used on your on-prem and legacy applications because it's going to give you the most accurate, detailed of service maps between the three, right? So this is going to be best used for your more critical business services. And typically when we start off creating service maps for organizations, it's going to be for those few critical business services. So top down is usually the first type that they get exposure to, right? But we also have a tag-based service mapping here at the top, right? So this method is going to build service maps using previously configured tags within your cloud environment, on virtualized, on your cloud resources. So this is going to be obviously your more preferred approach for containerized or your cloud resources. And then lastly, we have machine learning. So this is going to give you your fastest time to value, as it's going to require less upfront effort on your part, because it's actually going to be running in the background against schedules you already have in place and give you some connection suggestions to build out your service map based on the patterns it learns. So we'll kind of get into the specifics on why we would use each and one of these, but these are going to have pros and cons for each as well. So let's get into what they are for each one. So for pattern-based mapping, so again, this is going to be one of two methods for our top-down approach. We're using, as the name suggests, patterns. So service mapping uses patterns to discover and map out your CIs. And what a pattern is, for those of you who don't know, is a step-by-step set of instructions that tell Discovery exactly what to look for. So the pattern is going to tell Discovery, okay, you found the host. Here's what to do next, what endpoints to look for, which attributes to find, and what data points are needed. So I'll note that patterns are going to be pre-built out of the box, so we provide those to you, and you can see which ones are being run from your discovery logs pretty easily. But for pattern-based mapping, you can think of this as the method as casting a wide net to pull in your CIs that are relevant for your particular services. So this method is going to this method does require the most upfront effort, right? As it's going to depend on horizontal discovery, the patterns that you're going to use, any credentials needed to discover your certain data points, as well as this last bullet point here, any users that you need to create, as well as give any permissions for access to those applications within your private network. Now, the second part of top-down is going to be traffic-based mapping. This is going to create a more inclusive service map and complement that pattern-based service mapping. And just as this sounds, it uses traffic-based or TCP connections between your CIs to build out your service maps. So think of this to cast a finer net as it's using those traffic-based flow of connections. One thing to note for this one, because traffic-based connections are changing so frequently, just from the sheer amount of data that gets pulled in, sometimes we do see that this method pulls in a lot of clutter, maybe some irrelevant or redundant CIs. So as a best practice, we like to tell our customers that once you run this in conjunction with pattern-based discovery, for that initial discover, you review your map, you approve it, and then what we'll have you do is actually turn this traffic-based method off, so then you don't get all that extra data when you continue to run discovery in the future. All right, our second to last approach is going to be tag-based. So again, this is going to be our cloud and container-based approach for service maps. If your organization uses tags for asset management, for example, you can start to use these tags to map out application services. So here we're just using normal horizontal discovery to discover some of this tag data. And it's going to pull in these tag attributes like any other cloud-based kind of attributes that you have in your cloud environment. And when ServiceNow has that data, it's going to use that to build out one or more services based on what it's pulling in. One thing to note for our tag-based mapping here is this method is pretty much going to have a hard requirement of tag governance, right, to utilize this. And that kind of makes sense because if your tags aren't accurate in your cloud environment, then the tag data that you're pulling into ServiceNow isn't going to be accurate either. You start to pull in irrelevant or erroneous CIs, and that's why we kind of harp on tag governance to be key in order to use this method here. And luckily, ServiceNow has the tools and capabilities of governing tags that you're pulling in. So we try to make it as easy as possible as you're building out these maps via this method. And I know Matt from RapDev is going to go a little bit more in depth on some of these approaches, machine learning, tag-based. So we'll see what that looks like after our demonstration as well. And last but not least, we have our machine learning mapping. So how this is going to work is Discover is pulling in all this data from those, what we previously mentioned, right? TCP connections, those running processes from the CIs that are being discovered. At the same time, machine learning algorithms are running over all of that data to generate what we refer to as connection suggestions, where you can implement those into your service map either automatically or after review. And we can see how we set that up in our demo instance here shortly. With this one, we are using predictive intelligence or machine learning, right? So predictive intelligence is a machine learning solution. So what that means is it needs training. To achieve best results using this method, we have to run discovery repeatedly, and without the service mapping can have some erroneous data or erroneous CIs to your service mapping could be added, right? Or even could be a possibility to remove needed CIs from your connections. So it's really needed to run discovery repeatedly to make sure that training is set and in place before you utilize these. And on the topic of machine learning, service mapping approach, right? We have Service Mapping Plus, or its actual name is Automated Service Suggestions. So if you want to look at this in our ServiceNow docs, look for Automated Service Suggestions. But Service Mapping Plus, what it is just kind of an extension of service mapping. If you're entitled to service maps today, all you need to do is go into your ServiceNow store and install that plugin. And what it does is it really streamlines your time to value for generating service maps, right? When we talk about how to generate service maps from a machine learning perspective, and again, we'll get into the details of this. We talk about the platform is providing with this application fingerprint, so those running processes, these unique connections between these CIs to say, hey, this is in fact an application based off of these connections that I'm picking up. I'm going to suggest this based off of this fingerprinting. But as we're creating these service maps, we also have this manual entry of adding entry points. Sometimes we have to talk to a service owner about that. If we're the service owner, that's just something that we have to know. But a lot of people who are utilizing and creating service maps don't necessarily have that information. So we're trying to take that step further with Service Mapping Plus and provide and calculate those entry points for you. You got to take out another step of manual process within creating service maps. So this view can kind of, we've seen customers going from creating service maps, and it's taking them, days or weeks at a time to minutes, because this is able to provide you with candidates and resources or nodes to, create these service maps at a few clicks of a button. And we'll see what that looks like again. And lastly, I just wanted to provide you, again, we're providing the slide deck to you. So we want to make sure you have, all the resources, any kind of charts that you can have to look back on. So this is just the difference between the three, some of the pros and cons between each and how they look as they're built out. So just as your reference. All right, so for training paths, we want to set you up for success. So we want you to be able to kind of build on service mapping from a foundational, from a fundamental, starting ground, right? So that starts with our service mapping training. This is straight from our Now Learning ServiceNow webpage, right? So we have two options here. We have service mapping fundamentals instructor-led, as well as a on-demand or self-paced. So based on your learning style, based on your time and availability, you can choose either one of these, just because you're getting the same information. The information that you're getting from either one of these courses should allow you to pass the certified implementation specialist exam for service mapping. If you complete either one of these, you get a free voucher to take that exam. We do highly recommend the instructor-led, just because it's from a ServiceNow vetted instructor, either a ServiceNow employee or a partner. But these are very good. I think there's still 3-day led workshops, either in person or virtually. These are super highly recommended to take, just because you can ask questions like live, stuff like that. But of course, if your learning style is more on demand, self-paced, feel free to choose either one of these options here. All right, so that leads us to our next poll here. So our leadership status, who's been leading building your CMDB and service maps? So we have a Now CMDB pros in-house, we have staff augmented via external organization, have a dedicated project with the ServiceNow partner, and lastly, we're kind of winging it. So let's go ahead and launch the poll there, if we can. So here. Okay, here we go. All right. So take a few seconds to get the results for that. All right, cool. So it looks like the bulk of individuals on the call are kind of winging it. So again, we have multiple different kind of resources that help you along this journey, whether that's resources that you can learn in-house from our fundamental courses, from our YouTube channels as well. But we also, again, just like RapDev on the call here, a plethora of partners within our partner ecosystem that can help you along this journey if need be. That's what we recommend, kind of talking to a partner, because they can start to help you implement these best practices that we're talking about today in today's session. So, but good to know. Go ahead and stop sharing and move on to, looks like this is going to be the demonstration portion of our call today. So, and how this is going to work, we're going to talk step by step on how we configure each one of these approaches, and then we'll switch into our live instant and then repeat those steps for you. With that, I'll go ahead and hand it over to Chris.
Thanks, Chappelle. Okay. So you should be able to see my screen here now, but I'll give a quick introduction. Again, my name is Chris Del Castillo, and I'm also a service operations solution consultant at ServiceNow. And what I'll be covering for today's portion of the workshop is our 3 different configurations of service maps. So to begin, we'll start off with our top-down approach for service mapping. So we have a couple of steps that we'll break this down into. First, we want to make sure that our mid server is installed and active. So validating that mid server has been installed properly within our environment. And then we can enable horizontal discovery to start populating our CMDB with configuration items. So this will give us the data that we need to create our service maps. Second step, we want to define our entry points for our business services. So once we have that horizontal discovery set up and running, we're going to define where to start mapping from within our system. So this could be a single service or application, but defining that entry point is what can trigger the top-down discovery process. Third, we want to run that top-down discovery. So starting from the entry point that we've assigned, it'll find the host details within the CMDB, and then trace any of the connected components that we have until a full service map is created. Now we can review the service maps that have been generated. So we can choose to approve it within the system and provide any additional details like a product owner, a name and description of what the business service is. And finally, the most important step is keeping our maps up to date. So it's crucial to regularly run your discovery to keep those service maps current. And by doing so, this will ensure that we always have an accurate representation of the current state of our system's architecture. So to showcase what this top-down methodology of service mapping looks like, I'll move into my instance so we can see it in action. All right, so you should be able to see my ServiceNow instance here. And again, this first method that we're taking a look at today of top-down discovery for service mapping, we can see all of our mapped application services within this view here. I got to this point by typing in service map into the filter navigator up top. And then from here, we look at our application services. So within this table, we are technically on the second step, as these maps are created after we've done step 1, which was configuring our mid server, running horizontal discovery, populating the CMDB with their configuration items. So now we can start that second step, which is to establish the entry point. So to do so, we can click on this new button at the top of the screen here. Within this new view, we can create a new business service. So I'll give this one a name of checkout system. And we need to create a service owner for this business service that we're going to be mapping. And since I'm from Washington, D.C., let's just go ahead and say Abraham Lincoln is in charge of this service. So at this point, we can also choose all of the different entry point types that we have. So we have some common entry points here. And for the business service that I'm going to be building out today, I know that it's running on WebLogic, so I can go ahead and choose this HTTP endpoint. Now I am going to enter in this URL. And from there, let's see if I can type that in real quickly. Got to include that. Okay, there we go. So I've got my URL ready to go, and that is the entry point that I'm going to be starting that top-down discovery for this business service. Of course, when we're defining out these service maps, we include the owner, but additionally, we can have some more information like the host name and any comments that we want to include. And so traditionally, these would be details that you would get from a business service administrator. So whoever is in charge and it has the ownership and responsibility for this service that we're going to be mapping out. So I can go ahead and add in that endpoint and the entry point will be created there. So we know where to start that business service mapping from. So once I click save, what's going to happen in the background is that the service map will run to build out the map with horizontal discovery. And since we already have ran that horizontal discovery, we will use the configuration items that are already populated within the CMDB. So now I'm going to open up that record that I just created. So clicking on this checkout system application service that I created, I want to point out some of the fields that we have upon creation of this service. So we can denote its business criticality here. Here we have it set to 4 as not critical. Additionally, we have its operational status. So since we are mapping out this business service still, we have it set to not operational before we go ahead and approve this business service and its service map for use. So I'm going to take a look at a business service that we have mapped out. So here I'm opening up this credit check business service. So I'll click on view map in order to come to this view. So here we have a fully built out service map. And this map we can see was generated by providing an entry point. So we used an HTTP endpoint here. The service map then used that horizontal discovery to generate the service map from the configuration items automatically coming out of our CMDB. So if we wanted to go ahead and approve this map and make it operational, we can take the action on that here. So we'll go ahead and click approve service map. We can see our status right now is non-operational. Once we do so and approve that service map, it'll go and update that, run the discovery to go ahead and approve it, and the status will change to become operational. So going back to our table here and taking a look at all of our business services, we can go look at that credit check system. And we can see that the status has changed to operational after we have approved the service map that has been generated through top-down discovery. So what I mentioned earlier in our steps for top-down approach, the most critical one is to maintain our discovery schedules of these services. So to manage these different discoveries and make sure that we're keeping on top of our discovery schedules, we're going to open up the discovery schedule view here specific to service mapping. So we can take a look at the different discovery schedules we have here. I got to this point by typing in service map and clicking on discovery schedules within that filter navigator. Here we can see that we've got 2 out of the box schedules already set up. So this first one is for all applications, and we can see that it's set to run daily. So each day we will go ahead and run through that top-down mapping of our business services that we have within the table. And we do this in order to make sure that we keep that data up to date and any changes on configuration items within the CMDB are maintained within our service maps as well. So whether we want to discover specific business services on a more frequent basis, or we have less critical business services that we want to run on a weekly or monthly basis, we can define those parameters by creating a discovery schedule here. All right. So now that we have seen the top-down method of service mapping, let's go ahead and take a look at another approach of creating service maps, which is the tag-based method. So setting up our tag-based service maps, just like the first method, we want to enable horizontal discovery to ensure that our mid servers are active and populating the CMDB with configuration item data. Second, we want to utilize accurate tag data. So that relies on having accurate tag data from our cloud resources. So without running cloud-based discovery, we won't have that necessary information from the tags to build out our service maps. A third of which within this method is we want to define our tag families. So in our environment, by defining tag families and setting up tag keys, tag values, and tag categories, we're able to leverage that information to create the service maps. Once we have these tag families defined, we can then select our service candidates from the tag-based recommendations. And again, as always, it's essential to regularly run discovery to maintain the accuracy of our service maps. By doing so, we'll ensure that our maps reflect that current state of our system. So we'll move back into our instance now to see what that tag-based method of service mapping looks like. Oops. All right. So now we're back in that demo instance that we saw before. We're going to go ahead and open up our tag-based service maps. So going in and typing service map into the filter navigator here and clicking on tag-based services, we'll get to this table. So having understood how that top-down approach of service mapping generates the most comprehensive service maps, but we also understand that at the same time, it can take a considerable time and effort to define those entry points and run the horizontal discovery to generate those service maps with the most amount of information. Tag-based service maps are an easy way to implement this service maps, and it is low on time and effort as it leverages those existing tags you might have already within your environment. So by doing so, we can help you quickly build out your service maps and get you up and running on your journey. To preface tag-based service maps, tagging is used by many organizations to categorize cloud resources, and it's become the standard for adding relevant tags to your different cloud resources. Our discovery system leverages that tagging information during his horizontal discovery, and it populates the tags within the CMDB. In doing so, service mapping can then consume those tags to create application services, which are those tag-based maps that we'll be looking at today. So within our table here, I'm going to take a look at this recommendation prod service map that we have created. So I'll open up this service map here. And this was automatically generated based on our cloud resource tags. So we can see here, we've got the entry point and all the different configuration items that make up this business service. So we can click on each of these to get more information about the properties of these devices. And to showcase how simple it is to leverage our tag information, I'm going to go ahead and delete that business service that we just take a look at. So I'll click into the record here and delete this service. And I'll walk you through the journey of creating that service map using tags. So I'm going to go ahead and ignore this warning for removing that application service. I'll go back to the view here for our tag-based services, and we can see that it's gone. So now that we don't have that business service within our system anymore, let's go take a look at how we can create it again. So I mentioned CI tag categories earlier. So let's go take a look at the CI tag categories we have discovered within our environment. So opening up this CI tag categories table here, we can see the different categories that we've imported into our CMDB. We'll click on application services to take a look at the different tag keys that have been collected. So to preface some of the information we're seeing here, once we've defined our tag keys within our systems and we're looking for it from discovery, we also want to define any tags that may be used across different teams. So Within this tag category of application services, this is where we can define out the different tag keys that make sense for our cloud resource environments. So we see the different tag keys that we have with our application services to go ahead and narrow down that category. Now I'll open up our tag-based service families. So we'll open up this table here to take a look at that. And again, click on application services. So within application services here, we can see that we've got two tag categories, application service and environment. And together, these two different tag categories are going to make up the service candidates using these tags that will populate using the CIs that are within the CMDB related to this tagging information that we've determined. So service mapping will query that CMDB for the configuration items with matching tag values, and then matching those tag definitions that we have assigned, we'll create these service candidates based on what we defined as the tags here. So we'll click on these service candidates, and this will create multiples based on all the possible definitions of the tag keys that we have defined. So taking a look at this list here, we can scroll through to see all the different service candidates that we've generated. And here I'm finding the recommendation prod service that we had identified earlier and I just deleted. So we'll click on this to map out that selected business service. Click OK. And we can see that it has been added to the bottom here. So we can see the map services with this tag-based service family. So I'll open up the record. And now we can see we've got the status of not operational and what the different categories that were used. So I'll go ahead and recalculate this business service so we can associate the matching configuration items. And since we've already populated our CMDB, we should be able to just go back here and view the service map. So now we've got this tag-based service map back up and running within our system. And we have all of the relevant configuration items mapped to the business service based on the tags that we've defined. All right. So now we can introduce that final method of creating a service map, and that is the machine learning approach. So similarly, we have a few steps that we recommend for configuring this approach. The first of which is preparing for this approach. So first, we need to make sure that we have the connection suggestions properly active in our system's property table. So this can be turned off by default. So we just want to make sure that it is active. The second step is to enable any connection suggestions. These suggestions can be either automatically applied or you can review them manually. So in our demo, I'm going to review these connection suggestions to add to our existing service maps manually, but it's up to you if you want to automate that step or not. Third step we have is reviewing application fingerprint suggestion. So in addition to providing suggestions to our existing business services that we have mapped out, we're also able to provide suggestions for entire applications based on the connections we're finding during discovery. So Japel mentioned this earlier with using that TCP connection data. We're able to identify entire business applications that might not already be mapped out in our system. And then, of course, we have that final step of keeping our service maps up to date. So like the other methods, it's important to regularly run that discovery to ensure that our service maps we have reflect the current state of our environment. So let's head back into our instance a final time to take a look at the machine learning method of service mapping. Okay. So I'm going to go back to our mapped application services. Take a look at this table here. So again, we're back to all of the application services that we have mapped out within our environment. So as discovery is running and in your environment and it's discovering that configuration item information, in addition, it's also pulling in that information between any connections you have with your configuration items using that TCP traffic data. As that data is being pulled in, ServiceNow has a machine learning algorithm that is running over the collected processes and clustering them into similar groups. We call this process application fingerprinting, and it's how machine learning is creating candidates for service maps that might not have been created yet. So that same machine learning algorithm that's running over those data points can also suggest new connections for existing maps, which we'll take a look at here. And this benefits us by helping us to expand our service maps and keep them accurate when any CI changes can occur. So to take a look at these suggestions, we'll click on suggestions up here and open up connection suggestions. So these suggestions that we're seeing come with a confidence level of low, medium, and high, which can help us work as a guide to making a decision of whether to accept or reject a suggestion to add to our service maps. So as I mentioned earlier, we have the rule to automatically apply suggested connection, which in my instance is currently turned off. So we'll manually review the different suggestions that we've been provided here and decide whether or not to add them to our service map. Additionally, we can choose to exclude or change connections that were previously added and that we don't want within our service map. So based on the confidence level here that I am seeing, I'm going to click on these suggestions with high. So I'll click on these different records here, just going through, and I can add them. So if I wanted to exclude different suggestions, I could click on these checkboxes and exclude them as well. So now that I click on add here, we can go back to our service map that we just came from for this map that was created using our machine learning. So we'll go back here and we can see that we are going to go ahead and add those different connections. So currently my mid server is going to try and discover these. My mid server is not connected to my instance, so it's going to run into an error when discovering those here. But as it does so, those new suggestions will be added. So far, we've seen some different methods of service mapping and how machine learning-based service maps can enable you to build on your existing service maps with those suggestions. However, since those suggestions are just adding additional nodes onto our existing services, we still want to have a good understanding of our infrastructure and the services that make up of it. And we have to do so with those manual entry points that we're entering in to define our business services. So we don't have a good understanding of our overall infrastructure. It can be challenging to figure out, where do I begin? And that's where that automated service suggestions comes into play, which Jopel mentioned earlier was a part of that service mapping plus plugin. So it takes that machine learning based service mapping to the next level by providing application service candidates as suggestions. So these are entire business services that we can review the suggested service maps by looking at a preview and then decide to create those services with automatically identified entry points for top-down discovery to go ahead and build out our service maps. So I'm going to go ahead and open up our service mapping homepage here. So we'll click on service mapping home. There we go. Let's see. Here we go. Wrong link. So opening up this service mapping homepage here, we can see the different service suggestions that we have for the different candidates that have been pre-identified. So with what we're discovering within ServiceNow, using that TCP connection and processing data, we've identified these different suggestions that have a high confidence score from the machine learning algorithms and identified entry points. So we can open up one of these suggested candidates to take a look at what it's identified. So I'm going to go ahead and select this application service candidate and preview the map. So taking a look at this preview here, we're provided a few different points of information. Here we can see all the processes that are a part of this candidate, the communications that are happening between those devices and configuration items within the system, and what the effective entry points are of these devices. So we can see here that there are two entry points that are part of this candidate that are connecting to an Oracle instance and a WebLogic service, which is then connecting to the underlying processes. So if we decide that this business service is accurate to our organization's environment, we can go ahead and create the application service from this suggestion. So within here, we can provide a name for it. So we'll just call it a service, enter in who the service owner is and a quick description of it. And once I do so, we can go ahead and click on create service. As I do that, it will create a record within that application service table with the entry points provided, and then top-down discovery will then go ahead and build out that service map. So this is how within a few clicks, we're able to create an application service using machine learning and the suggestion candidates that have been provided. So that concludes the demonstration portion of today, where we saw 3 different methods for creating our service maps. I'll now pass it back to Japel to talk about the resources to help you get up and running with service mapping, and then make sure that you stay along here for our partner RapDev to learn more about implementing these practices.
All right, thank you so much, Chris. I'll go ahead and share my screen. All right, yeah, thank you so much for walking us through those different approaches there. It's great to see them kind of in live in the demonstration. But kind of just to close our the ServiceNow portion out here, I just want to go over the additional resources as well as some key takeaways that we went over for today's call. So key takeaways, first and foremost, we went over the value of service mapping, right? How we can get momentum with this with discovery and start to get things connected so that our CMDB is more service aware and working for us. Number two, so those we went over those service mapping approaches, right? Again, those are going to be machine learning, top down, as well as tag based, and what skills are needed and what best practices are to maintain those, right? So we also have, some resources that I want to share with you, but hopefully after listening with us today, what you get out of this is the ability to start your own service maps. I know a lot of you in the poll said that you're practically in your infancy stages of implementing service maps. So hopefully we gave you that foundation, or at least some of the resources to look back to once you start to feel ready that you ready to implement some of these service maps at your organization today. So some of those additional resources that we have here are a few videos about leading practices, tag-based machine learning, as well as automated service suggestions or service mapping plus, some documentation around service maps, as well as a link to our product page. Now with that, that leads us into our featured partner, RapDev. Here, I'll just hand it over to Matt, who's going to, drill into more of these machine learning as well as some of their service offerings that they provide. So Matt, it's all yours.
I appreciate it. Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and start sharing. You guys, let me know if you can't see anything or if anything gets interrupted at any point. And I think there are already people answering some of the questions in the Q&A. So this is the new service mapping workspace. I'm going to jump into a couple.
I don't know if anybody else lost Matt. I think we lost your audio, Matt.
Sorry, can you guys hear me now?
Yes.
Let me jump on into this piece then. So service mapping can be very valuable. And the goal is to figure out, what are the ways that you can get to that value the quickest. Depending on what kind of a organization, how you deploy technology, what kind of services you have and everything like that. It can vary as far as the easiest methods to use. But I'm going to focus on a little bit more today is, hey, for more modern kind of teams, more modern kind of, circumstances, how can you get the quickest value out of service mapping? And what are some of the ways that you can get there using some of the more recently released features? So this is the service mapping workspace. Again, I'm from RapDev. I'm a solution engineer, working with customers on how to do this stuff every day. And so basically, when we look at the workspace, Chris touched on a few of these things. We do have the ML powered candidates now in this workspace, which is nice, and we have some candidates that we could pick from. We could go in here and accept any of these, like what Chris was showing a minute ago. But we have a few other angles that we can look at from this perspective. We can look at what our breakdown is across our different types of creation methods for service mapping. We can see breakdowns across criticality and everything like that, and we can even see quickly highlight the non-operational service maps. If we want to dig into servers that are mapped and unmapped, we have the ability to dig into those too. And so this is really a valuable view to understand the state of service mapping. And to get all the latest features, you definitely want to upgrade to the Service Mapping Plus SKU. It's something that it also enables you to have some of these more modern UI elements. I wanted to show to you some of the setup of the Service Mapping Plus side. This page helps you understand kind of the status and any issues that have been run into of mapping that's being done. It helps you understand, hey, the prerequisites that you have to set up to be able to do automated service mapping with machine learning, including application fingerprinting and connection suggestions. You can see the training status and suggestion status. In this instance, there's not enough data to train it for process connections, but we do have all of the application fingerprints that are training as they go. So there's a few that have recently been discovered. Those will get trained the next time the training job runs. And then we also get connection suggestions that might be correlated here to any kind of service issues that we see. We can always use these to drill into service issues that might be found to resolve those and be able to get maps completed.
I think we lost you again there, Matt.
Those teams that build applications. Can you guys
It's still no audio from you if you're talking. I don't know if you're troubleshooting or. right, so we're going to give it a couple minutes for Matt to troubleshoot on his end. Just sit tight and we'll be back with you. Yeah, in the meantime, we can try to answer some of these questions that are coming through Q&A. So yeah, one saying is that service mapping workspace custom built or out of the box part of service mapping module. So that's going to be out of the box as long as you have, the most up-to-date service mapping piece. And once you do have that, you'll be able to install the Service Mapping Plus plugin. So that's what's needed to actually utilize Service Mapping Plus or automated suggestion connections. So that's the only other piece that's needed in order to utilize the display that Matt was on. And it looks like we got Matt back in the Zoom call. Just let me know if you're ready to go, Matt.
Hey, can you guys hear me okay now?
Yep, I can hear you on my end.
All right. Sorry about those issues. I
Nope.
think Zoom just decided to restart, but just quickly wanted to highlight, hey, if you're building your own services, how can you quickly get to value with this? And what are some ways to make it easier on teams who might need to provide some information about services to be able to map them, but they don't know how to use ServiceNow necessarily, right? So RapDev has a solution to this called CSTM as code. And the way that CSTM as code works is you just drop a simple file like this into your repo, wherever you're building the services, right? Wherever you're writing the code for them. And so this allows your dev teams that might be writing code that can build their own services that they're deploying into your environment. They can register those services into ServiceNow without ever actually using ServiceNow or needing to know what any of the terms mean, what the different CMDB classes or the types of services mean, or to even understand how service mapping works. And they're able to easily fill out a file like this, where we give them the list of attributes that we want from them, things like the name of the service, what its parent is, who's responsible for owning it, fixing it if it breaks, and so on. And then they also are able to define down at the deployed level, hey, when I deploy this service, I'm going to deploy a prod version of it. So we have that here. And I'm going to give it these two tags for all the resources that are associated to that service. And what this enables is it enables us to cut out all of the back and forth, all of the kind of painful parts of gathering this information, because they can provide it right here in one spot in the repo. And what we basically, the plugin that we have is it's pulling this file out, it's processing all this into ServiceNow, and it's building those services into CMDB so that they will automatically map those resources to them as the resources are discovered. So if we look at an example of how this works, in our CSDM as code plugin, you have different entities that you can map. You guys saw I mentioned the business application and the microservice one in that YAML file that I was showing a minute ago. So the developer's providing those details. That's getting processed through here. There's field mapping and things that sit underneath this that I'm not going to spend a lot of time on today. But if you want to know more, we did multiple sessions at Knowledge about this, and you can easily follow up on those to learn more about how this works. But suffice to say that it creates the services into ServiceNow. It tags all the right owners, relates the right support groups, and it builds the maps with any resources that come up underneath those same tag values using tag-based mapping. So it's basically an automated way of building out the tag-based maps that you want to set up based on the tagging strategy that your developers are actually defining on the pre-deployment side. So the next part of this is we get to a place where we have a service. We get our list of services in here, and you guys saw the one we were looking at just a minute ago was this hotel demo payment service production one. And so that's where we get to a place where we have maps that are getting created automatically into ServiceNow. And then they can start to relate to other resources that are in CMDB. I want to highlight one last thing here before we wrap up. We haven't talked a lot about service graph connectors today. There are actually several service graph connectors that can help build maps for your services. And an example of that is OpenTelemetry connector. So if your organization happens to use OpenTelemetry, which is just a way of instrumenting your services to monitor them, then you can easily set up this service graph connector. But there are also ones for like Dynatrace and App Dynamics, AWS and Azure and GCP that can help with building these maps. And when you get one of these service graph connectors set up, it's going to bring in several different types of CIs. Here, the OpenTelemetry one brings in a few different kinds, including pods and containers and clusters that are in Kubernetes. What this enables at the end of the day is us to have a service like this one that we created from the CSDM as code plugin that is then being related down to Kubernetes pods and containers and the cluster over here that were all discovered using the OpenTelemetry service graph connector. So it brings in those CIs. It creates some relationships between them, but then they are related due to the tags that they have. They're related up to the top level of the application service, the tag-based service, and then the SDLC component, and even the business application up here at the top. So we get to a place where we actually have a very holistic view of our service across the different areas of CSDM, which we didn't really talk a lot about today, but there's a data modeling aspect to this too, in terms of how services are built, how they're configured, and how they're run. And so this is what we're using in the field to help make it easier to get customers to value, even in situations where they're building completely custom services and they are wanting to be able to represent those in ServiceNow. Happy to take any questions that anybody has as we have a few minutes left here. But those are the main things that I wanted to highlight today. And I'll take a look too in the Q&A and see if there's anything else that's been asked recently. Is the service mapping workspace custom built or out of the box service mapping module? It is. I'm going to answer this one live. It is actually part of Service Mapping Plus is the main way to get that installed. I believe the rest of the questions have largely been opened or answered. Can you guys still hear me fine?
Yep. Yeah, it looks
Good
like
deal.
most of the questions are answered, and I think we're good to go, Matt.
Awesome.
Awesome.
Thanks
So,
everybody for spending the time with us today. And I think the last thing I'll just throw out there is if you want to talk more, feel free to hit me up on LinkedIn or reach out to us through our website. We're just rapdev.io. And so if you guys want to talk more about, how you can get to value quickly on service mapping, we're here to help. But appreciation to Eric and Jafal and the whole ServiceNow team, Chris, for having us today. And we're looking forward to some of these other webinars and workshops that are coming up.
awesome. Thank you so much, Matt. So, all right, looks like we already launched the poll here. So it's just after leaving this webinar, what's next for you? So we have more questions? Let's move on to AI ops. Let's focus on discovery first, or a great info time for mapping. I'll leave that for a couple seconds for you. So we have mostly everyone leaning towards discovery first, right? I mean, we have some people who are ready to go with service mapping. So again, hopefully we've learned a little bit about, at least foundationally, how we can get up and running with your service maps. So definitely thank you all for attending today's session. Again, we're going to have another session in about a month from now for AIOps. So here's the QR code that you can scan and register for that. But all in all, I think that's all we have for you to prepare for service mapping anyways. So again, thank you for your time. And hopefully you can get up and running with this. So I appreciate the time and participation, and take care.